A nun heard a confession and laughed at murder. Welcome to Midnight Radio Drama. I am your host, Wilfred. Tell me where you're listening from, your stories. Keep this community alive. I can't wait to read every comment. Let's begin. In the placid market town of Flaxborough, where the humdrum of daily life was broken only by the predictable cadence of council meetings and the seasonal flower show, an unusual disturbance stirred the quiet waters. The event was the annual charity bazaar held in the village hall, an occasion attended with dutiful enthusiasm by nearly everyone who fancied themselves a pillar of the community. Inspector Purbright arrived early, his demeanour composed as ever, his sharp eyes quietly noting the delicate bustle of preparations. Ladies arranging bouquets of chrysanthemums, gentlemen fussing over raffle tickets, and children whispering conspiratorially behind the refreshment table. The scent of freshly brewed tea mingled with the faint aroma of wax polish and varnished wood, a sensory backdrop to the otherwise unremarkable gathering. Among the familiar faces was Sister Agnes, a nun known locally less for solemn piety and more for an uncharacteristic and rather infectious sense of humour. She stood by the entrance, her crisp habit immaculate, yet her eyes twinkled with an irrepressible mischief that set her apart from the usual solemnity one might expect. As the afternoon unfolded, the room was filled with polite chatter, the occasional burst of laughter, and the measured clinking of teacups. The mayor was midway through a speech extolling the virtues of charity when an abrupt commotion near the door drew attention. A sharp cry cut through the air, followed by the discovery of the body of Mr. Alfred Nettlefold, the town's retired solicitor, sprawled unceremoniously across the tiled floor, a faint trace of blood marring his otherwise impeccable attire. Sister Agnes, standing nearby, let out a brief, unexpected laugh, a sound so incongruous amid the shock that several heads turned towards her. Her expression was unreadable, a flicker of something unreadable playing at the corners of her mouth before she composed herself and stepped forward to assist. The room buzzed instantly, whispers and guesses ricocheting like stray arrows in a tavern brawl. Who would want harm upon the mild-mannered solicitor? Was it a tragic accident, or something more sinister masked beneath Flaxborough's genteel surface? Inspector Purbright, unfazed by the stir, surveyed the scene with the practised calm of a man accustomed to the undercurrents beneath polished exteriors. The nun's laughter, the timing of the incident, the subtle expressions of the gathered townsfolk, all were notes in a complex symphony he intended to unravel, one polite question at a time. Thus began a mystery that would quietly unsettle the rhythms of Flaxborough, revealing that even in the most orderly of places laughter could echo darkly. The shock of Mr. Alfred Nettlefold's sudden collapse at the charity bazaar rippled swiftly through Flaxborough, a town that prided itself on its orderly existence and the predictability of its social rituals. As word spread, whispers multiplied like wildflowers after a spring rain, each new telling embroidered with personal bias and local prejudice. The mild-mannered solicitor, a fixture of town life, was now the subject of hushed speculation that ranged from tragic accident to something far less innocent. Inspector Purbright, true to his methodical temperament, began his inquiries with measured calm. He preferred to listen first, allowing the voices of Flaxborough's residents to reveal the hidden fissures beneath the polished surface. The hall where the bazaar had been held still bore the faint scent of tea and damp chrysanthemums when he returned, this time accompanied by Sergeant Mallard, whose youthful eagerness contrasted with Purbright's steady reserve. Their first interview was with Sister Agnes, who had, somewhat inexplicably, been among the first on the scene. Her unexpected laughter at the moment of discovery had caused a ripple of discomfort among the attendees, though none dared openly question her. Purbright approached her with polite formality. "Sister Agnes, might I trouble you for your account of the afternoon's events?" he asked, his tone gentle but precise. The nun's eyes sparkled beneath her habit, a faint smile lingering despite the grimness of the occasion. "Inspector, one cannot always suppress the absurdity of life, even in moments of tragedy. Mr. Nettlefold had just been teasing me about my reluctance to try the raffle prizes. It was all so suddenly, well, unexpected." Purbright noted the ease with which she spoke, her humour a curious contrast to the solemnity around her. "Did you observe anything unusual before Mr. Nettlefold collapsed?" Sister Agnes's expression grew thoughtful. He seemed his usual self, though a bit flushed from the warm room, perhaps. "Nothing that suggested impending danger." From there, Purbright turned his attention to the other key witnesses: the mayor, whose grandiloquent speech had been cut short; Mrs. Lydia Pritchard, the town's florist, who had arranged the chrysanthemums; and young Timothy Harper, a local lad who claimed to have seen a stranger lingering near the hall's entrance. Each narrative added threads to the growing tapestry of mystery. The mayor, with his habitual penchant for embellishment, suggested that tensions within the town council over recent planning applications might have sparked ill will. Mrs. Pritchard confided in a whisper that Mr. Nettlefold had been seen arguing with an unidentified visitor the previous evening. Timothy, for all his youthful enthusiasm, insisted the stranger had a limp and wore a long coat, features that had stuck in his mind like a pin in fabric. Purbright listened with the patience of a man attuned to the nuances of small-town life, aware that such details might appear trivial but could prove pivotal. He made mental notes of each contradiction and corroboration, knowing that truth in Flaxborough was often found in the subtle interplay of facts and personalities. Back at the police station, the cufflinks found on the floor near Mr. Nettlefold's body were examined. They bore a crest unfamiliar to Purbright, but suggested a connection to a local family of some standing, the Everetts, whose influence in the town extended quietly but firmly through property and patronage. This revelation opened a new avenue of inquiry, linking the solicitor not only to his professional duties, but also to the town's social hierarchy, where debts and favours wove an intricate web. As evening fell, Purbright took a quiet moment by the window of his office, the soft glow of lamplight illuminating his thoughtful expression. The town's familiar streets stretched out beyond, wrapped in the hush of night, but beneath the calm lay a tension, like the taut string of a violin awaiting the bow. He reflected on the nature of the case, an unexpected death that disrupted the delicate balance of Flaxborough, a community bound by tradition yet vulnerable to the undercurrents of ambition, rivalry, and concealed motives. The laughter of Sister Agnes, which at first seemed an oddity, now struck him as a note of defiance or insight, hinting at truths others might prefer to ignore. Purbright resolved to tread carefully, to follow the threads without haste, allowing the town's secrets to unravel in their own time. For in Flaxborough, where the ordinary masked the extraordinary, patience was the detective's greatest ally. The morrow promised more questions, more stories whispered over garden fences and in dimly lit parlours, each a piece of the quiet puzzle that Purbright was determined to solve. And so the investigation into the nun who laughed at murder began in earnest, beneath the polite surface of a town unwilling to acknowledge the darkness that sometimes lies just beyond the garden gate. The days following the unsettling discovery at the charity bazaar ushered in a wave of subtle unrest throughout Flaxborough. Though the town maintained its usual veneer of civility, whispers swirled beneath the surface like autumn leaves stirred by a restless wind. Inspector Purbright, steadfast and patient, understood well that beneath these murmurs lay the true threads of the mystery, threads that required careful teasing apart. His first order of business was to revisit the scene, now cleared of the festive clutter but heavy with a lingering tension. The village hall stood quiet, its polished floor reflecting the faint afternoon light filtering through stained glass. Purbright's measured footsteps echoed softly as he examined the spot where Mr. Alfred Nettlefold had collapsed. Nearby, the faint impressions of a hastily dropped handkerchief caught his eye, the delicate embroidery of initials E. Tomblius just visible along one corner. A trivial detail, perhaps, but in Flaxborough, such minutiae could unravel much. The inspector made a note to inquire about the handkerchief's owner, suspecting it might be a forgotten clue rather than an accidental remnant. Purbright's inquiries next led him to the homes and workplaces of several townsfolk connected to the solicitor. He began with Mrs. Lydia Pritchard, whose flower arrangements for the bazaar had been praised by many. At her cosy cottage, fragrant with the scent of roses and lavender, she received him with a cautious but polite hospitality. "Inspector," she said, "I admit the whole business has left me rather unsettled. Alfred was a gentleman, albeit a somewhat prickly one." Purbright inclined his head. "Mrs. Pritchard, did Mr. Nettlefold mention any worries or disputes recently?" She hesitated before answering. There was talk of a disagreement with one of the Everetts, a family of some influence in town. I heard whispers that he had been threatening to expose certain financial irregularities, but you must understand it's all just gossip. Sometimes gossip has a habit of pointing toward truth, Purbright remarked quietly. Next he visited Mr. Edwin Everett, a reserved man whose estate was one of the largest in Flaxborough. The Everetts had long held sway in the town's affairs, their presence felt in both the market square and the corridors of power. Everett's study was lined with volumes on law and finance, a testament to the family's traditional values. He received Purbright with a measured calm that barely concealed a flicker of irritation. "Inspector," Everett said, "I was distressed to hear of Mr. Nettlefold's demise. Alfred was an old associate, but our views did diverge, especially regarding the stewardship of family interests." "Did those divergences become contentious?" Purbright inquired, noting the slight tightening of Everett's jaw. "Professional disagreements are to be expected, but I assure you nothing that would warrant such a tragic outcome." Purbright studied the man thoughtfully. The neatly pressed cufflinks on his sleeves bore the same EW embroidery as the handkerchief found at the scene, a connection that deepened the intrigue. Throughout the next days, Purbright expanded his inquiries, speaking with town councillors, local shopkeepers, and even the occasional gossiping housekeeper. Each revealed a layer of Flaxborough's social fabric, woven with rivalries, loyalties, and secrets that simmered beneath the town's polite exterior. At the King's Head, the familiar watering hole, conversations flowed freely, too freely for some. Purbright noted the sharp exchange between Councillor Margaret Holbrook and a young solicitor newly arrived from London. Their discussion touched on land deals and shifting alliances, with veiled references to Mr. Nettlefold's recent legal advice. One evening, as Purbright returned to his office, he found a letter slipped beneath his door, a brief note unsigned but hinting at matters better left undisturbed and warning the inspector to mind the nun's laughter. The cryptic message both intrigued and unsettled him. Was it a mere prank or a veiled threat? Despite this, Purbright's resolve remained firm. He recognized the pattern, the town's resistance to change, its tangled loyalties, and the fear that truth might unravel more than just one reputation. With patience as his compass, he planned his next moves, aware that the quiet town of Flaxborough was less predictable than it appeared. The laughter of Sister Agnes, once dismissed as eccentricity, now echoed in his mind as a challenge, a reminder that beneath civility could lie a sharp and knowing edge. The case deepened, and so did Purbright's determination to bring clarity to the shadows where laughter and murder strangely intertwined. The sun rose over Flaxborough with a mild persistence that morning, the kind of light that revealed imperfections without harshness, much like the town itself, where secrets lingered just beneath the polished surface. Inspector Purbright set out early, his usual deliberate stride leading him through familiar streets now tinged with an undercurrent of tension. His first destination was the convent where Sister Agnes resided. The nun's unexpected laughter at the scene of Mr. Nettlefold's collapse had intrigued him from the outset, a small, seemingly incongruous detail that refused to settle comfortably in his mind. He arrived just as the convent garden was waking to the soft cooing of doves and the faint scent of freshly turned earth. Sister Agnes received him with a warm smile, her eyes sharp and clear beneath the crisp white of her habit. "Inspector, I was beginning to think you might not visit so soon. What can I do to help?" Purbright inclined his head. "I hoped to speak with you further about that afternoon. Your laughter was unexpected, but I suspect there is more to it than mere amusement." She chuckled softly. "Ah, yes, laughter in the face of death. It can be a defense mechanism, or perhaps a recognition of life's absurdities. Alfred and I shared a certain fondness for irony." He nodded thoughtfully. "Did you observe anything peculiar that day, or in the days leading up to it?" Sister Agnes's gaze flickered briefly. Mr. Nettlefold was troubled, though he kept his worries closely guarded. I heard whispers, fragments of conversation in the parlour, voices hushed behind closed doors, matters involving the Everetts, as you have doubtless discovered. Indeed, the Everetts seem deeply entwined in this. Purbright tapped his notebook. "Did Mr. Nettlefold confide in you or in anyone else about these concerns?" "Not directly," she replied, "but I sensed he was wrestling with more than just legal briefs. He was a man bound by duty, yet restless, beneath." Their conversation was interrupted by the soft arrival of a postulant bearing tea. As Sister Agnes poured the steaming liquid, she added casually, "There is something else, Inspector. Mr. Nettlefold had a habit of recording his thoughts in a small leather-bound journal. I believe it was kept in his study." That could prove invaluable. Purbright's mind began assembling the pieces anew. Leaving the convent, he next called upon Miss Eleanor Beckett, the town's keen-eyed reporter. She greeted him at the Gazette office, surrounded by piles of papers and the low hum of a typewriter. "Inspector," she said, "the town is rife with speculation, much of it unhelpful. But I think there are truths buried beneath the surface, truths that Alfred was close to uncovering." Purbright leaned forward. "Have you heard anything about his journal?" Beckett nodded. "Yes. Apparently it contained notes on certain irregularities, financial, legal, perhaps even personal. Unfortunately, it has gone missing since the bazaar." The missing journal was a setback, but also a clue in itself. Purbright's gaze drifted to the window, where the market square bustled with cautious energy. He spent the afternoon speaking with townsfolk, each conversation adding texture to the evolving portrait. Councillor Margaret Holbrook expressed concern over the dangerous games being played, while Frederick Colson, a local businessman, hinted at tensions between the Everetts and other influential families. Later, Purbright attended a discreet meeting with Sergeant Mallard. They reviewed their notes and shared observations. "There's more at play here than a simple accident or fainting," Mallard remarked. "The town's secrets are leaking out, and someone's desperate to keep them hidden." Purbright nodded. "And that laughter, Sister Agnes's laughter, it's not mere eccentricity. It's a signal, perhaps a challenge." As dusk fell, Purbright returned to the village hall, now silent and stripped of its festive trappings. He examined the layout again, noting the positions of furniture and the flow of guests. His eyes settled on a small scuff mark near the entrance, a subtle imperfection in the polished wood that suggested hurried movement. He made a mental note to inquire further about arrivals and departures during the bazaar, particularly any unusual behavior. That evening, a letter arrived at the station, unsigned, but written in a hand both elegant and hurried. It warned Purbright to look beyond the obvious and question those who wear their piety like a mask. The inspector folded the note carefully, a faint smile touching his lips. Flaxborough's quiet facade was beginning to crack, and the laughter that had once seemed out of place now sounded more like a clue, a key to unlocking the mystery that had ensnared the town. He settled back into his chair, the weight of unfolding secrets pressing gently, but insistently. Tomorrow would bring more questions and perhaps a deeper understanding of the shadows cast by laughter at murder. The town of Flaxborough was, for all its picturesque charm and orderly traditions, a place where the past clung tightly to the present like ivy on old stone walls. Inspector Purbright understood this intimately as he resumed his inquiries into the curious death of Mr. Alfred Nettlefold, a man whose outward propriety concealed a tangled web of obligations, grudges, and unspoken fears. The day began with a visit to the solicitor's study, a modest room cluttered with ledgers, legal tomes, and a scattering of letters tied with faded ribbons. The missing journal, a leather-bound volume said to contain notes on financial irregularities and personal affairs, was nowhere to be found. Yet Purbright's trained eye caught sight of a single sheet of paper pinned beneath a blotter. The handwriting was neat, but hurried, and the words hinted at a meeting arranged under cover of dusk, involving the Everetts, and a matter best kept from the council. Purbright carefully bagged the note for later examination. Later, in the market square, Purbright encountered Albert Dent, the marrow grower, tending to his prized vegetables with the patience of a man used to long seasons and slow rewards. "Mr. Dent," Purbright began, "have you noticed any unusual activity around town lately? Visitors or meetings that might relate to Mr. Nettlefold's concerns?" Dent wiped his brow, glancing cautiously around. "Well, Inspector, Flaxborough isn't what it used to be. Folks whisper about the Everetts pulling strings behind closed doors. I've heard of late-night gatherings in the old mill. Strange company, if you ask me." "Late-night gatherings?" Purbright's interest sharpened. "Aye, not the sort of thing for good honest folk. And if it's true what I hear, some council members aren't as innocent as they pretend." Purbright thanked Dent, filing away the information. The interplay between wealth, influence, and secrecy was growing clearer. His next call was on Councillor Margaret Holbrook, a woman known for her sharp tongue and sharper wit. She welcomed him into her parlour, where the scent of lavender mingled with the faint aroma of sherry. "Inspector," she said briskly, "Flaxborough's reputation is at stake. I'm convinced that Mr. Nettlefold stumbled onto a scandal that threatens to unravel the town's carefully maintained order." "Do you suspect anyone in particular?" Purbright inquired, noting the subtle hesitation in her voice. "Certain families who cling to power," Holbrook replied, "and those who enable them." "It's a web of complicity, Inspector." As they spoke, Purbright's mind circled back to Sister Agnes. Her laughter, once dismissed as odd, now seemed to embody a knowing defiance, a refusal to bow to the town's silent codes of silence. That evening, Purbright arranged to meet her again, this time in the quiet sanctuary of the convent garden. The air was cool and fragrant with night-blooming jasmine. "Sister Agnes," he began, "your laughter, Does it signify something more? A challenge to those who would hide behind respectability? She smiled enigmatically. Perhaps. Laughter can be a light in the dark, Inspector. It exposes the cracks and forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. Do you know who might have wanted to silence Mr. Nettlefold? She hesitated, then said softly, Power is the currency of many here, and the price of truth can be high. Purbright's thoughts turned to the mysterious letter he had received, warning him to question those who wear their piety like a mask. The nun's words seemed to echo that sentiment. As the investigation deepened, Purbright found himself navigating a labyrinth of alliances and resentments, where every polite smile concealed calculation and every whispered conversation hinted at hidden agendas. Back at the station, he reviewed the forensic report. No signs of foul play on the body, yet the positioning and timing suggested that the collapse was no mere accident. Combined with the missing journal, the note about secret meetings, and the growing tapestry of suspicion, the case was transforming into a study of human frailty and the corrosive effects of power. Late into the night, Purbright penned a note to Sergeant Mallard. Arrange discreet surveillance of the old mill and the usual council meeting places. There are shadows here that must be brought to light. Outside, the town slept under a blanket of stars, unaware that beneath its gentle rhythms the wheels of truth were turning slowly but inexorably. And at the heart of it all, the nun who laughed at murder remained an enigma, a beacon or a warning. The inspector could not yet decide. The old mill, perched at the edge of Flaxborough's eastern boundary, had long been a relic of the town's industrious past, a place where grain was ground and fortunes once made, now reduced to creaking timbers and shadowed silence. Yet, as Inspector Purbright observed from a discreet distance one crisp evening, the mill had become a clandestine meeting place, its faded walls sheltering conversations that might well determine the town's future. Sergeant Mallard, youthful and keen-eyed, had kept vigil alongside Purbright, their patience rewarded when a small group of figures arrived under the cloak of dusk. Among them were Councillor Margaret Holbrook, Frederick Colson, the local businessman known for his polished manners, and, to Purbright's subtle surprise, Edward Fenwick, the retired schoolmaster, whose reputation was that of a quiet man, more given to books than politics. The inspector noted how the group moved with deliberate purpose, voices low but animated. It was clear this was no social call but a gathering to discuss matters best kept from public scrutiny. Following the meeting, Purbright arranged to speak privately with Fenwick, choosing the unassuming confines of a local tea room. Fenwick, though initially guarded, gradually revealed cracks in his composed exterior. "Inspector," Fenwick began, stirring his tea absently, "I have long believed that Flaxborough's character is worth preserving, but preservation, as you know, can be a double-edged sword." Purbright nodded, encouraging him to continue. "There are forces in town, families like the Everetts, who wield influence in ways that stifle progress and intimidate dissent. Alfred Nettlefold was beginning to challenge that, asking questions that made certain people uneasy." "Did you share his concerns?" Purbright asked gently. Fenwick sighed. "To some extent, yes, but I also feared the consequences of upheaval. Change is necessary, but it must be managed with care." The retired schoolmaster's candour, though measured, hinted at an internal conflict between loyalty and principle, fear and courage. Meanwhile, in the town itself, the atmosphere grew thick with unease. The King's Head saw more frequent gatherings, whispers replacing the usual cheerful banter. Emily Spencer, a young councillor known for her idealism, expressed frustration at the growing opacity surrounding town affairs. At Purbright's request, she shared what she knew of recent council debates. There's been talk of land sales and development plans that many believe serve private interests rather than the common good, she confided. Mr. Nettlefold's involvement threatened to expose some unsavoury arrangements. Purbright made careful note of the names and dates she provided, recognising a pattern of vested interests shielding themselves behind the town's decorum. One morning, as Purbright reviewed his files, a local gossip, Mrs. Beatrice Moffat, appeared at his office unannounced. With a theatrical whisper, she claimed to have overheard an argument between Frederick Coulson and a stranger at the market, words laced with veiled threats and promises of silence. Though wary of Mrs. Moffat's penchant for exaggeration, Purbright recorded the account, understanding that even the most embellished tales could contain kernels of truth. As the investigation pressed on, the inspector grew increasingly aware of the delicate balance he had to maintain. The town's reputation was a fragile thing, and his inquiries risked unsettling not only the guilty, but innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire of suspicion. Back at the convent, Sister Agnes received a visitor, Miss Eleanor Beckett, the intrepid reporter whose curiosity matched Purbright's own. They spoke in hushed tones amid the scent of lilies and the quiet rustle of pages. "The town's masks are slipping," Beckett observed. "People are afraid, but some are eager for change. It's a powder keg waiting for a spark." Sister Agnes nodded. "And laughter is sometimes that spark, revealing what lies beneath the surface." Purbright, aware of the mounting tensions and the intricate web of alliances, prepared for a careful, calculated approach. He understood that the next move in this quiet game of shadows would be critical. With patience and discretion, he planned a series of polite but pointed questions and encounters, his own test, to unsettle those who sought to conceal the truth. As night deepened over Flaxborough, the inspector sat by the window of his office, the glow of lamplight reflecting in his thoughtful eyes. The nun's laughter echoed in his mind, not a mere quirk, but a signpost guiding him through the complex maze of human motives and social facades. The story was far from over. The next chapter awaited, where masks might slip, and the true players reveal themselves in subtle but telling ways. The delicate balance of Flaxborough's social tapestry was showing signs of strain. Inspector Purbright, ever mindful of the town's intricate web of loyalties and secrets, understood that now was the moment to press gently, yet decisively. The quiet game of politeness must give way to pointed inquiries designed to unsettle those who cloaked themselves in respectability. He began with a carefully arranged meeting at the public library, a neutral ground where the town's influential figures often crossed paths under the guise of civility. The room was lined with shelves of leather-bound volumes, the faint scent of aged paper mingling with the soft ticking of a grandfather clock. Purbright welcomed his guests, Councillor Margaret Holbrook, Edward Fenwick, Frederick Coulson, and Emily Spencer, each bearing their own carefully curated composure. "Thank you all for attending," Purbright began, his tone measured. "I hope you understand that these discussions serve not only the town's interests, but also the integrity of its governance." The group nodded politely, exchanging subtle glances that hinted at unease beneath the surface. "Mr. Fenwick," Purbright addressed the retired schoolmaster first, "you have expressed concerns about the influence of certain families in town, particularly regarding planning and development. Could you elaborate on these matters?" Fenwick cleared his throat, choosing his words carefully. "It is a matter of stewardship, Inspector. Some families hold sway not just through ownership, but through the quiet enforcement of their interests, discouraging dissent." "And Mr. Coulson?" Purbright turned to the local businessman. "There have been reports of meetings at the old mill that suggest attempts to consolidate such influence. Care to comment?" Coulson's expression tightened, though his voice remained even. Discussions about the town's future are inevitable, Inspector. It is only natural that stakeholders convene to ensure stability. Purbright noted the equivocation. Stability, yes, yet when transparency is lacking, suspicion flourishes. Councillor Holbrook leaned forward slightly. Inspector, you must understand the pressures we face. Balancing progress with tradition is no easy task, especially when personal interests are intertwined. Emily Spencer, younger and less guarded, added, "But it must be done with honesty. The town deserves that much." The conversation continued, Purbright skillfully steering it to reveal nuances and contradictions. He observed the subtle exchanges, glances exchanged, hesitations before replies, the way some words were emphasized while others were carefully avoided. Later, Purbright arranged to meet Sister Agnes at the convent. She greeted him with her usual twinkle of mischief, tempered by genuine concern. "I trust your meeting went well?" she asked. "Better than expected," Purbright admitted. "The masks are beginning to slip." She nodded. Sometimes it takes a little laughter to loosen the tongue. Purbright shared his observations, and together they discussed the possibility that certain individuals might attempt to manipulate the investigation's course. In the following days, Purbright observed the town's rhythms with renewed attentiveness. At the King's Head, he noted the wary silence when certain names were mentioned. In the market, traders exchanged glances that spoke of unspoken fears. An unexpected visitor arrived at the police station, a solicitor from London named Charles Harding, claiming to represent a distant relative of Mr. Nettlefold. His arrival introduced new complications, suggesting that the deceased's affairs were more tangled than previously thought. Purbright met with Harding in his office, where the solicitor produced letters indicating that Nettlefold had been entrusted with safeguarding sensitive documents relating to property transactions, documents that could unsettle powerful local interests if made public. As the inspector digested this revelation, he reflected on the mounting pressures and the potential consequences for Flaxborough. He resolved to continue with his careful but unwavering pursuit of truth, aware that the next moves would require not only intellect but diplomacy and tact. The nun's laughter, once an anomaly, now seemed a refrain underscoring the fragile line between order and chaos, a reminder that beneath Flaxborough's calm surface lay a reservoir of tension waiting to be released. Purbright prepared himself for what lay ahead, knowing that the unravelling of this mystery would demand patience, subtlety, and an unerring sense of when to strike. The atmosphere in Flaxborough had grown palpably tense, the town's usual rhythm interrupted by murmurs and glances that darted like shadows in the fading light. Inspector Purbright felt the weight of these silent undercurrents as he walked the familiar streets, his mind weaving through the tangled strands of intrigue that bound the players in this quiet drama. His attention was drawn again to the missing journal of Mr. Alfred Nettlefold. Despite exhaustive searches, it remained elusive, a ghostly presence in the investigation. Yet Purbright sensed it held the key to unravelling the threads connecting the Everetts, the council disputes, and the cryptic warnings he had received. A breakthrough came unexpectedly. A letter, unsigned but carefully penned on expensive paper, arrived at the police station. It hinted that the journal might be hidden in a place where shadows meet the light, an enigmatic phrase that led Purbright to revisit the old town library, a building of pale stone and stained glass that caught the afternoon sun in kaleidoscopic fragments. There, in a seldom-used reading alcove tucked behind the shelves, he discovered the journal concealed beneath a loose floorboard. Its leather cover was worn, and inside, the pages were filled with meticulous notes, observations, and cryptic references to financial dealings, secret meetings, and personal betrayals. As Purbright delved into the entries, he found detailed accounts of a clandestine pact among certain town dignitaries, designed to control development projects and maintain their grip on power. The entries also revealed Mr. Nettlefold's increasing unease and his intention to expose the scheme at the upcoming council meeting. Yet, as he read on, Purbright noted passages that suggested personal conflicts as well, indications that the solicitor's troubles extended beyond politics into matters of the heart, involving a discreet but poignant relationship that had soured. The inspector paused, considering the complexity of human motives behind the apparent facade of civic duty. That evening, he convened a quiet meeting with Sergeant Mallard and Miss Eleanor Beckett, whose reporting had begun to capture the subtleties of the town's unrest. "Here lies the tangled heart of Flaxborough's troubles," Purbright said, tapping the journal. "But it is not merely a matter of corruption. There are personal wounds beneath the surface, wounds that can be just as deadly." Beckett nodded thoughtfully. "And the nun's laughter? Could she have known more than she let on?" Purbright smiled faintly. "Sister Agnes has a way of seeing what others overlook. It is her insight, veiled in humour, that has kept us from rushing to premature conclusions." The next days saw Purbright testing the waters with carefully posed questions during council meetings and social gatherings. He observed reactions closely, the flicker of a twitching lip, a quick glance away, the stiffening of posture. One evening a discreet note reached him, an invitation to a private gathering at the Everetts' estate, ostensibly to discuss town affairs. Purbright accepted, aware that such events often served as stages where true intentions were revealed beneath the artifice of polite conversation. At the gathering, he mingled among the guests, members of the local elite whose smiles rarely reached their eyes. The conversation was measured, but beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Purbright's subtle questioning, combined with his unobtrusive observations, began to unsettle the room. A seemingly innocuous remark about misplaced trust elicited a reaction from Frederick Colson, a slight tightening of the jaw, and a quick glance toward Edward Everett. The inspector noted these signs carefully, knowing that in Flaxborough the smallest gestures often spoke volumes. As the night wore on, the veil of civility thinned, and Purbright sensed that the puzzle pieces were slowly aligning. Yet, despite the mounting evidence, he remained cautious. The truth, he knew, required a final test, a moment when the guilty party might reveal themselves through reaction rather than words. Returning home that night, he reflected on the subtle dance of suspicion and revelation, and on the nun whose laughter had opened the door to understanding. The investigation was reaching a critical phase, and the inspector steeled himself for the delicate manoeuvres ahead. The early morning fog settled softly over Flaxborough like a whispered secret, lending the market town an otherworldly stillness. Inspector Purbright took his usual walk through the streets before heading to the station, but today his pace was slower, deliberate. The quiet had grown heavier in recent days, as though the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the surface. The discovery of Mr. Nettlefold's journal had opened more doors than it had closed, each page revealing tangled alliances, personal grievances, and the quiet mechanisms of power that governed Flaxborough's seemingly genteel society. Yet despite the accumulating evidence, Purbright remained aware that the final truth was not simply a matter of documents or overt actions. It lay in the small gestures, the hesitations, the contradictions, the behavioral clues that forensic reports could never reveal. His thoughts returned to Sister Agnes. Her laughter at the bazaar, once perceived as incongruous or unsettling, now seemed like a carefully placed note in a larger symphony of human frailty and defiance. She understood the town's unspoken rules and, in her way, challenged them. That morning, Purbright requested a private audience with her in the convent garden. The cool air was fragrant with the scent of early blossoms, and the gentle rustling of leaves seemed to underscore the gravity of their conversation. "Sister Agnes," Purbright began, "you have been an enigma in this investigation. I wonder if you might shed light on the personal dimensions of Mr. Nettlefold's troubles." She regarded him with a knowing smile. "Inspector, you must understand that in a town like Flaxborough, the boundaries between public and private blur. A scandal need not be political to be dangerous." "Did he confide in you about anyone in particular?" Her eyes darkened slightly. There was a man, a figure from Mr. Nettlefold's past, whose return unsettled him greatly, one who wielded influence quietly but effectively. Purbright made a note, intrigued by the new direction. Later that day, Purbright arranged a discreet meeting with Emily Spencer, the young counsellor whose idealism had marked her as somewhat of an outsider in the entrenched political scene. Over tea in a sunlit parlour, she revealed that there had been rumours of an affair, one that complicated alliances and deepened resentments. "Alfred was not just a lawyer," she said quietly. "He was a man caught between his duty and his passions. That made him vulnerable." The inspector nodded, reflecting on how human frailty often intertwined with ambition and fear. Meanwhile, Sergeant Mallard reported an unusual development. Surveillance at the Everett's estate had captured a late-night visitor, a figure seen entering discreetly but leaving hurriedly just after midnight. The visitor's face remained obscured by shadows, but the timing suggested a secret meeting that coincided with a critical entry in the missing journal. Purbright's suspicions sharpened. Someone was taking measures to conceal their involvement, and the delicate balance of power in Flaxborough was teetering on the edge. That evening, at a town council meeting, Purbright posed a question designed less to elicit information than to provoke reaction. "Given recent revelations," he said evenly, "does anyone wish to clarify their involvement in Mr. Nettlefold's concerns regarding the development plans?" The room fell into a stifling silence. Then Edward Fenwick cleared his throat and spoke with measured restraint. "Inspector, I can only say that while I supported transparency, I also feared the upheaval such revelations might bring." Margaret Holbrook added crisply, "Change must be tempered with prudence." Purbright observed their faces, noting the subtle avoidance of direct answers. Later, in the quiet of his office, Purbright reviewed his notes, each name and detail fitting into a slowly emerging mosaic. The missing journal, the cryptic letters, the secret meetings, all converged toward a nexus of personal and political motives. Yet the greatest clue remained the behavioral ones, the slight tightening of a jaw, a momentary glance away, the nervous laughter that didn't quite reach the eyes. He knew the time for his final test was approaching, a carefully crafted moment designed to unsettle the guilty party and bring the truth into the light. Outside, the town's clock tower chimed the hour, its measured toll echoing through the cool night air. In Flaxborough, the quiet mystery was nearing its resolution, and Inspector Purbright prepared to draw the threads together with the patience and subtlety the case demanded. The dim glow of gas lamps cast long shadows along the cobbled streets of Flaxborough as dusk deepened into night. Inspector Purbright, with the calm assuredness born of years navigating the subtleties of human nature, prepared for the final stages of his investigation. The pieces were now arranged on the board. It was only a matter of careful manoeuvring before the truth would reveal itself, not through dramatic confession, but through quiet, civil confrontation. Purbright's plan was simple yet deliberate. A gathering of the key figures implicated by his inquiries convened under the guise of a routine council meeting at the town hall. The room, steeped in the heavy scent of polished wood and old paper, was a fitting stage for the closing act. As the guests arrived, Councillor Margaret Holbrook, Edward Fenwick, Frederick Coulson, Emily Spencer, and even Sister Agnes, the inspector, noted the subtle shifts in posture, the measured exchanges of glances that spoke of unspoken tensions. "Thank you all for attending on such short notice," Purbright began, his voice steady and courteous. "There are matters that require clarity, not only for the sake of justice, but for the preservation of Flaxborough's community spirit." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "Mr. Coulson," he addressed the businessman first, "you have been observed attending late-night meetings and engaging in discussions regarding development plans. Could you elaborate on your involvement?" Coulson's reply was smooth, his tone diplomatic. "Inspector, I have always acted in the town's best interests, seeking stability and growth in equal measure." Purbright inclined his head. "Yet, some might argue that transparency was sacrificed in favor of private gain." The room held its breath as Coulson's smile flickered, brief but telling. Turning to Edward Fenwick, Purbright said, "Mr. Fenwick, your hesitations have been noted, as have your concerns about change. Would you care to explain your role in these affairs?" Fenwick met the inspector's gaze steadily. "I have tried to balance respect for tradition with the inevitability of progress. My actions have never been meant to harm, only to protect." Purbright's next question was directed at Sister Agnes, whose presence had been a puzzle throughout. "Sister Agnes, your laughter at the bazaar was a moment that surprised many. What did it signify?" The nun's eyes twinkled. "Laughter is sometimes the only honest response to human folly, Inspector. It was not mockery, but an invitation to look beyond appearances." Emily Spencer added softly, "It is honesty that Mr. Nettlefold sought to bring to light, even at great personal risk." Purbright nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed, Mr. Nettlefold's journal, which has since been recovered, revealed more than just financial dealings. It spoke of personal betrayals and the consequences of concealed truths." He turned to the assembled group. "This brings me to a more delicate matter, one that touches on both public and private spheres." His gaze settled on Margaret Holbrook. "Councillor, there have been rumours and suggestions about a relationship between Mr. Nettlefold and a figure whose influence runs deep in our town. Would you care to clarify?" A faint flush coloured Holbrook's cheeks, and for a moment the polished veneer cracked. "Inspector, I see no relevance in personal affairs overshadowing the business at hand." "But sometimes," Purbright replied gently, "personal motives can shape public actions in profound ways." The room fell silent, the air thick with unspoken admissions. Purbright continued, "It is clear that Mr. Nettlefold's death was not accidental. The timing of his collapse, the missing journal, and the secret meetings all point to a calculated effort to silence him." He paused, allowing the statement to resonate. The question remains, who stood to gain most from his silence? Eyes flickered around the room, searching for answers. Then, with quiet precision, Purbright revealed a detail hitherto unmentioned. The handkerchief embroidered with the initials E.W. found near the scene, linking Edward Everett to the location at a critical time. Everett's composure faltered, a shadow crossing his face. "It was I who confronted Mr. Nettlefold," Everett admitted slowly, "not to harm, but to warn him of the dangers in pushing too far. Things have a way of spiralling beyond intention." Purbright's tone was mild but firm. Warnings can be deadly if ignored, yet the truth cannot be suppressed without consequence. As the weight of confession settled, Purbright concluded, "Flaxborough must learn that its strength lies not in concealment but in the courage to face uncomfortable truths." The gathering dispersed with measured solemnity, the fragile equilibrium of the town forever altered. Later, alone in his office, Purbright allowed himself a moment's reflection. The nun's laughter had been a beacon, an invitation to see beyond facades and uncover the human complexities beneath. Justice, he knew, was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, patient, and delivered with the softest of words. Flaxborough, with all its quirks and contradictions, would endure. The morning light filtered gently through the lace curtains of Inspector Purbright's modest office, casting delicate patterns across the scattered papers that told a story far more complex than the quiet town of Flaxborough usually warranted. The previous evening's gathering had unfolded with a civility that masked the profound shifts now settling into the town's fabric. As Purbright prepared to bring his inquiry to its inevitable close, he reflected on the nature of truth in a place where appearances were carefully curated and secrets jealously guarded. The room was still but for the soft ticking of a brass clock, its steady rhythm a reminder of the inexorable passage of time, time that had revealed hidden grievances, whispered alliances, and the fragile human motives that had led to Alfred Nettlefold's untimely death. Purbright arranged his notes meticulously, each detail a thread in the tapestry of a mystery woven not from overt villainy but from the subtle interplay of ambition, loyalty, and fear. The discovery of the journal, the concealed meetings at the old mill, the quiet confrontations, all had illuminated a town struggling to reconcile tradition with change. He thought of Sister Agnes, whose laughter had been a curious but telling refrain throughout the investigation. It was not mockery but a gentle illumination, a refusal to accept pretense without question. The inspector's door opened quietly, and Sergeant Mallard entered, carrying a fresh pot of tea and an expression tinged with anticipation. "Inspector," Mallard said, setting the tea down, "the town's waking up to a new reality. I've heard murmurs already, some hopeful, others resentful." Purbright smiled faintly. "Change is always met with mixed feelings, Sergeant, but the first step is acknowledgement." Later that day, Purbright convened a final meeting in the town hall. The room, familiar yet newly charged with significance, welcomed the assembled townsfolk who had come to hear the truth laid bare, not with flourish, but with quiet dignity. Purbright began, his voice measured and calm. "Flaxborough has long been a town where appearances and reputations matter deeply. It is also a town of complexity, where personal and public lives intertwine in ways that are not always visible." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. Mr. Alfred Nettlefold was a man caught in such a web. His death was no accident, but neither was it the work of a violent hand. Rather, it was the result of fear, pride, and a desire to protect secrets better left unspoken. He recounted the findings, the clandestine pact to control development, the tensions among the town's elite, and the personal conflicts that had heightened the stakes. The journal he kept was a testament to his growing unease and his courage in seeking truth. Purbright's gaze swept the room. The individual who confronted Mr. Nettlefold, Edward Everett, did so out of fear for what exposure might bring. Though intentions were not malicious in the conventional sense, the consequences were tragic. A murmur rippled through the assembly, the air thick with reflection. Flaxborough now faces a choice: to continue beneath the weight of silence or to embrace openness and the gradual progress it demands. Sister Agnes rose, her serene presence commanding attention. "Laughter, dear friends," she said softly, "is often our response to what we cannot change at once. It invites us to look deeper, to find grace amid imperfections." Emily Spencer, young and resolute, added, "This is our chance to build a town where truth is not feared but welcomed." Purbright concluded, "The past cannot be undone, but it can teach us. Let this be a turning point." As the meeting dispersed, the atmosphere was tinged with a cautious hope. The cracks in Flaxborough's polished facade had been exposed, but with them came the possibility of renewal. Returning to his office, Purbright settled once more into the familiar quiet, the steady tick of the clock underscoring the closure of one chapter and the beginning of another. He allowed himself a moment's satisfaction, not in triumph, but in the quiet knowledge that patience, observation, and gentle persistence had served justice well. Outside, the town moved forward, carrying with it the echoes of laughter and the promise of change.